Okie doke. Hello, ktheakadrian. Your question is, how could I carry this game? How do I play the laning phase better against such a bully lane? Or against such a bully lane? How do I set up, or how do I step up? I'm guessing this is as Kog'Maw, and my macro management as ADC. How do I play the mid to late game better? So, a lot of questions there. The main ones being how to carry the game, how to play the lane better, and then the macro and just the macro mid to late game. I'm gonna go ahead and start with this. How do I play the laning phase better against such a bully lane, and how do I step up as Kog'Maw? So let's go ahead and skip a little bit into the laning phase here, so I can kind of have a good example. Okay, and the enemy's roamed away. Kind of need them to get back to lane here, so they're gonna do dragon. Let's skip ahead even more. Leona's roaming. Okay, let me just go all the way back to the beginning here, because just to use it as an example, let's imagine that they're like pre-level 6, right? Against a melee support and with a high damage ADC such as Kai'Sa, their whole game is to get onto the Kog'Maw and burst him down. So you want to be playing around that. And since you have a Karma, you and Karma's goal is to poke the Leona basically in a 1v2, so that if she engages, then you kite her engage with your cleanse and by walking backwards, and then you re-engage onto her with your Kog'Maw E, Karma Q, Karma W, and then Karma Shield to give you the speed to catch up to the Leona. During all of that, your lethal tempo is also building up, and then you can auto her down with your W, for example, once her Aftershock is worn off. So that's kind of how you should be looking at the lane in terms of the basics, and then also pre-6. And the ways you want to do that is you want to play on the Leona and not on the Kai'Sa. So if we are looking at the freeze frame right now, we're too far away from the Leona to hit her, and there's not a good reason for that. Obviously we're level 1, but in general, not exactly in this freeze frame, but you want to be on the same line as the enemy champion that is best for you to hit, so that if you get the opportunity to, then you can hit them, and then that damage builds up, and that's going to create a better lane for you overall in general. So that's kind of what I got for how to play the laning phase better, and then against such a bully lane. So let's just watch the replay, see where we get with the other questions. With the runes, you're running Taste of Blood and Ravenous Hunter. In a lane like this, where it's melee versus range supports, I don't think that that's super necessary, because that extra healing comes more into play whenever you both have melee supports. Since we have a Karma in our lane, having biscuits and free boots would be totally fine, because it would give us more leniency in casting our R, because the fights are going to be pretty extended for us if we're going to be winning them, and we're going to be building up our R most likely. So having that extra mana to get off maybe a last R can become pretty impactful, because that's dealing a lot of damage, especially in the early game. And missing out on the healing from Taste of Blood and Ravenous Hunter is not a big deal, because Taste of Blood is a laning tool. If we're not trading every 20 seconds with it, then we're really not getting massive value out of it. Missing out on the extra, let's say fully stacked Ravenous Hunter could become more efficient in late game team fights, but in late game team fights, if it's mostly Kog'Maw's job to shred the enemy and for his allies to protect him. It's not for him to have extra survivability. Okie doke, so we're pushing them in. Our Karma goes to the river. This is what's happening in the river. And then when that's dissipated, we go back. Whenever you enter the river, you do need to be pretty defensive about it, because as Kog'Maw, we're not like a Kai'Sa. We're not like a Draven, a Samira. We don't have these season 11 tools to dash 20 times and get onto the enemy. The enemy has to come into us as Kog'Maw. Alrighty, so here the Leona engages onto the Karma, and then we start hitting the Leona. Every single time the melee support goes onto your support, you immediately want to be hitting the enemy ADC, because the enemy melee support will always be too tanky for it to be worth our time. And that's what we end up doing eventually. auto the Leona twice though, the Leona with Aftershock on. And then as you can see, like this is how easy it is to take out the enemy ADC, but if things like that are closer, then you always want to have those 2 autos that you had on the Leona onto the Kai'Sa. Alrighty, so let's switch the vision here. In a spot like this, we could recall. Whenever the wave is like up here, it will come back to you. So if you give it time, or if you're like feeling bad about like if the jungler could gank you, even though you just got the kill, since the Leona's here, like they do have an opportunity. In this case, it's just going to be some damage. And then Leona's getting a bit too crazy. Punish them, but then we're going too deep. And then here's where you kind of go wrong as well. We've already gotten away with murder, right? 1, we've avoided the gank, and then 2, we got a kill for it. So whenever you trade autos with the Kai'Sa here, it's asking way too much. Because our Karma doesn't have shield, she's already spent it on us. She doesn't have exhaust, we don't have heal because we're running cleanse. So all you have to do here is keep walking backwards and get out of there, because this wave is coming to you. So by getting out of there, you're guaranteeing yourself another kill worth of gold and XP with this wave and the next wave that's coming in. Because if you survive, they can't kill you under turret, and everything's fine from there. But you keep trying to auto the Kai'Sa, that gives the Kha'Zix more distance on us. And then he takes us out. Whereas if we keep walking backwards, then it's going to work out a lot better for us. And then this is all the minions that we miss for that. Luckily, Karma freezes the wave, though. You love to see it. Okie doke. So the lane's going okay for us so far. We do have Noonbo Quiver. You end up building into Shield Bow this game, which the same deal as Ravenous Hunter. I don't think it's as good as Kraken Slayer, for the reason that even though the enemy does have a lot of burst on the top side, Kai'Sa, Akali, Kha'Zix, Riven, they all want to just kill you instantly, right? Shield Bow will save you in some situations, but it's mostly going to help you with like bad positioning. The lifesteal is not useful until you take damage either, and since you have an enchanter support that protects you, it gains even less value because Karma's going to be blocking that initial damage that the enemy is going to be dealing with her E, and then during that time, you could be building up lethal tempo and be getting your Kraken Slayer going. Kraken Slayer also gaining massive value with whenever you complete Rage Blade, and Phantom Dancer as well, if you build into those. So even though it is scary to play into a lot of these like high burst damage champions without like a lot of protection for yourself in Shield Bow, it's going to be better to deal more damage against them because these champions are very mobile as well. Riven goes in and out of fights. Kha'Zix jumps in, stealths. Akali does the same thing. So whenever they're in range for you to hit, you want to be dishing out as much damage as you can, as fast as you can, because killing them is like basically the best CC. And if you don't have that like enough damage fast enough, then you can find yourself in really awkward positions where your W is on cooldown and the team fight like continues to happen. So one, you can't get into range to hit, and when you do, you're not dealing enough damage. And then if you do move into that short range for your auto attacks against these champions, like it's kind of doomed. So in terms of how to play this lane better, since there's been a whole lot of just moving, like the supports moving out of lane, there hasn't been much to it other than that initial gank. I think that's an important thing to focus on. So we push out the wave, we roam mid, get the kill onto Riven, and then we can go back bot. Going back bot is fine. Okay, auto. You should always try to fish for those R's just to get as much damage off as possible. Udyr's going to do the blue and then Gromp, and then if Kai'Sa for some weird reason was to stay, if she's 100 HP less, it makes it just that much easier to dive her if you go for the second R. And so long that you have enough mana for your W early game, you're doing totally fine. Okey-doke. So Leona tries to hold the wave, Udyr backs her off, and then we go for a recall. Good enough. A nice thing about the biscuits with free boots as well is that since we're basically always going to be delaying our boots to power into our mythic item, we'll have boots around the time that we complete our mythic item for free, which Kog'Maw is a champion that you want to be laning all the time. You never want to be like moving into the river and whatnot, because that just puts you in worse spots. more often than not, especially in solo queue. So here, you don't need to shove this wave. In fact, you want the wave to come into you. So this is our map state that we see. Whenever the wave is close to the enemy turret, it will push into you, because the enemy minions will come and hit your minion wave faster than yours will come up the lane, because whenever the minion wave arrives, it just has to get to these minions and then it'll hit them. Whereas if your minion wave arrives to your turret, it has to go all the way up the lane here. So this wave will come into you. What you should be focusing on at this stage of the lane is either AFKing, so doing nothing, which is totally fine. Our Udyr is not in a position to help us. None of our solo lanes have TP. We don't know where the Kha'Zix is. And the enemy is at an okay power level. But since we have shield bow, we can play it a bit more aggressive. So if we go forward here, what you could do is position to let the Leona E onto you. And then Kai'Sa can choose to ult in, but in this case, her ult's down. So let Leona E onto you, and then we can just kind of kite it out. And then Leona's E is on... or her aftershock is on cooldown, and then we can get a little bit of damage onto her. Since we have shield bow, all this is really, really safe. We don't even have to use cleanse whenever the Leona would go onto us, because if Leona E's from here to here, the Kai'Sa has to walk from there to there. So it's a lot of distance for her to travel, where we just have to kite to the left or downwards, and then we're gaining more distance away from the Kai'Sa, whereas we've made Leona like dedicate herself on top of us. So you could play it like that, but unleashing on the minion wave here doesn't do anything other than give safety to the Leona, the Kai'Sa, and give Kha'Zix an opportunity to gank you. So you want to be trying to fight your lane here because you have item advantage, and everything's just like really safe. But you like unleash on the minion wave here, spinning the E, all the auto attacks, even the W. And now if the Leona chose to E onto you, and let's say like Kha'Zix blast cones over at the exact same time, like that's our cleanse and then maybe our flash. Even though like we have this shield bow over them. So Leona tries to E, tries to give us a chance, and Kha'Zix shows behind us. So really, really look for those sort of situations where you have item advantage, the wave's coming into you. You don't want to trade into the minion wave, but since you have item advantage, you can break that rule and then try to bait the enemy melee champion to put themselves on top of you, but then be far enough away from the enemy ADC to where you basically put the enemy support in a 1v2, or you and the Karma can choose to turn onto the Kai'Sa once the Leona has spent all of her CC on you. You just create like hard winning situations and you bait the enemy into them. Okay, so here's the shield bow value. It kind of works out, but only because we're in like a really crazy position to begin with. Okay, so Kha'Zix is flanking. We don't want to move into him like this. You want to let the Kha'Zix move into you. So then he flashes over, and then Udyr flashes over. So now we have Leona and Kai'Sa coming in, and Kha'Zix going out, and then Riven and Diana coming from mid lane eventually. So we can't catch up to this Kha'Zix no matter what. He has the tier 2 boots, we don't have any boots. So you have to concede that he's out of our range, and you have to let the fight play out. Even if Udyr's like going to die or has put himself like in an unwinnable state, you have to let that like play out. So you need to play in a stationary position and let the enemy come into you and then start hitting them. But we don't do that. We just keep moving into the Udyr. If you stand your ground, let Leona move into your attack range and then attack her as she's like trying to show up to this fight. That's your best bet. So use your Q on her as she's coming in, build up lethal tempo, and then if she keeps coming, activate your W and auto her down. And then if she doesn't come, then maybe you can keep going this way, or maybe you just go back to the minion wave, you know? So now we keep moving deeper and deeper into the river. Diana's not coming, Riven is coming, guaranteed. Kidoke, and then Leona goes onto the Udyr. Udyr gets a kill onto the Leona, which isn't that great for us. And then as the Riven's coming in, as she flashes, we would have to flash downwards, probably right here. Or else we're going to take the damage, and then that sets up Kha'Zix for his damage as well. But it kind of works out. But spinning both of our sums for that makes us a lot more vulnerable for the rest of this laning phase. So once again, moving into the river is pretty risky. Get another kill onto Leona, oddly enough. And then just recall. Just recall. Just... okay. Your main goal on ADC throughout like most of the game should just be like finding farm. And if it's always just showing up for these fights, then things are going to be really, really inconsistent in your gameplay. Even if like your team wants them or whatever, it's just... you got to see the situation for what it is. Okey-doke, so we spin the ult, and then moving into the tri-brush, Leona gets the E, Akali gets an in, and then now we're just in an unwinnable position, and then luckily the Kai'Sa wants to die, I guess. But none of this has to happen. You just have to play more defensive, like as you're approaching these sort of team fights, because it's up to your allies to be the front line for you and to set up like a proper fight. So then the rest of the laning phase, like you can end the laning phase a lot earlier after this. So after that dragon fight, and after these weird skirmishes, I mean, this is kind of the same deal. You're trying to follow up on what the Diana's doing. If you're not using the F keys, then you're not going to be able to see like what's happening fast enough. So if you're always moving your champion as your camera, then you're going to be putting yourself in bad positions every single time as ADC. So as they go in, Riven has enough mobility against you, and then too much damage as well. And we get taken out. So what I was saying with like let the enemy come into you, don't move yourself towards them to see them. Let them like come into you and then move your camera instead, because you have to see like what's coming, but you can't like move your camera centered screen to get the enemy on your screen without putting yourself like in a position to be attacked, especially whenever they're playing champions that have a million dashes. So the other question, like your macro mid to late game, in this case, on this reset, you could look to swap with mid lane, because about like past 14 minutes, you should be looking to swap with mid lane at some point. So here, our mid lane spawns a little bit before us, because we both died around the same time. If you ping your mid laner like as they spawn, like you ping on top of them and then you ping the bot turret, they'll basically get the idea. If they don't go bot, then that kind of sucks. But a champion like Diana should be going to a side lane. Someone does ping it. You do ping to defend it. Nice. But then you don't swap mid, which is kind of understandable. So then if we have to be here, push out the one wave and then walk mid, because we don't know what's in the fog of war here. I mean, now we do. Now we do, I guess. Oh, yeah. But hitting the turret is not going to be a winning move. It's just going to be too much threat. In this case, the Riven shows up, and then that's that. So in the mid game, you always want to be trying to swap with your mid laner like as soon as you can, because being in the mid lane is going to be a lot better for you. And usually being in a side lane is going to be better for your mid laner as well if they're playing these melee champions like Silas, Diana, things like that. Okey-doke. So I'm going to go ahead and skip ahead here because we don't have much time. So I'm going to skip to this fight. Oh, I know what happens actually. So here there's like this whole dance for this dragon. Our teammates die and then the fight's kind of dissipated. But then everyone sticks around. And you're exploring too much by yourself, right? This is our front line, this is our support. We don't want to be in front of them ever. So, where's Riven? Is she over this wall? Are we dead instantly to a flash W? Like, with Kai'Sa coming over, something like that. Like, and then pushing the wave aggressively after a fight like that has dissipated also just gives the enemy an opportunity to attack you. So the points in which, like, you're losing is overreaching for this farm rather than like letting it come to you. Because if the wave's right here, eventually that wave pushes towards you. You just have to be more patient and let things come into you, and then it's going to work out a whole lot better. Okey-doke. Let's skip ahead to this. So our top side's caught out. As the enemy's trying to do Baron, they get basically completely taken out. And then here, we want to be standing our ground and then getting some damage off. But it's not that important to get a whole lot of damage off because it's very unlikely that we actually win this fight. So we ult, and then we click forward. You want to like use your Q to get the lethal tempo going, and then be like standing your ground, and then be ready to move backwards as the enemy is coming into you, because they're guaranteed like coming into you and your allies here. They wanna kill everything in front of them. So then Leona flashes in, Qs, we get the cleanse off, and then we're kiting with the Karma Shield, and then Akali comes from the side. This is why following up on fights like that are so hard, because we just don't have enough. We don't have enough damage. The Bork, the Shield Bow, the Hurricane, it's just not enough at this stage compared to like a Kraken, PD, Rage Blade. And then your fourth item after that can be something defensive. So we could have Kraken, PD, Rage Blade, GA, for example, and that's going to be a lot more useful for us. So the enemy gets Baron. Nothing happens for like a super long time. Just a whole lot of farming in the mid lane, and then we're setting up for a dragon fight. The enemy TP's in, and it's getting kind of weird. You click upwards, but we don't know what's in the bush, and then Akali's there, and we have to end up flashing. So now everything's totally screwed in this fight for us. And then as the fight starts, we're hitting... who is this? We're hitting the Riven. And then we have to keep kiting. A good E, and then here you don't actually have to kite because this is just Leona on top of you. Who's going to follow up? If the Kai'Sa ults in, that's fine. If we move forward, we're not going to be isolated to the Kha'Zix, and we can hit the Akali, who is one auto attack for us to kill pretty much. So you're over kiting this Leona since you have the cleanse. Like, let her stun you and then get way more DPS off on this Kha'Zix, which is a way more important target. So if you're hitting the Kha'Zix or the Kai'Sa there, it's all going to be a lot better. So that would be that's a really good example of a point to like overreach in the fights. Nice. We unload on him. That's the Kog'Maw fantasy right there. This is how you want the fights to go for you. So kiting way too far back, just stand your ground and then wait for the Kha'Zix to move into range and then auto attack him. If he jumps onto you, then you can start moving into your allies. But if you're moving this far back, you're just putting yourself out of the whole fight. But the good side of that is that the whole enemy team moves into you and your allies, and then you look for the DPS. So that part's good. Over kiting, not so good. Kidoke. So then we get the dragon. Or the enemy gets the dragon. Word. And then the whole game comes down to like this random fight, which is whatever. This is like kind of how it goes. So a whole lot of DPS onto Leona. So if we have Kraken Slayer, she's dead there. And we don't have to like do this extra auto. But now the enemy Riven and Kha'Zix are behind us, and that makes things super basically impossible to play into, but your only play is to move forward. We can't move into the Kha'Zix Riven here. But you kite backwards, move right into the Kha'Zix and the Riven, versus moving into this Kai'Sa and then also staying on your team. And that's going to seal the deal for this one. Once the Riven's on top of you, it's lights out. So that's the game from there. Let's get back to the questions. This was a very long one, so sorry if I didn't hit absolutely everything. The main question of like, how do you carry the game? The main things that like put you on the back foot was not being able to endure the enemy's attacks. So every single time the Riven looked at your lane, you died. Whether you're up the lane, whether you're trying to follow up on your teammates' fights, regardless, like you're faltering because you don't like see it coming, whether it's either on the screen or just from the mini map. So you need to have more awareness. So that's like looking at the mini map more, having a good idea of like what's coming at you, and then playing around it accordingly. How do you play the lane better? I think I hit that pretty well. especially in this lane, you really could have abused the Leona a whole lot more. But if you're always shoving the wave into the enemy, especially when you have an item advantage, then you don't get to fight them, and you only provide safety for them and put yourself in a position to be ganked. So when you have item advantage, or if you're strong enough, then you can look to, whenever the wave's even, just look to attack them, or look to bait them into you when the enemy ADC can't follow up, for example. And then with your macro mid to late game, like find gold on the map mid to late game. That's all the macro that you really need to be worrying about when fights happen and whatnot. Like it's up to, like, it's good for you to be in position to show up, but it's not as important as being in position to farm. So if your team's taking fights, like say you just cleared a wave and you're doing the wolf camp, and your team starts a fight and the enemy blue side that game, like it's not up to you to walk all the way there, you know, it's a dumb play. So look for farm, and then put yourself in more defensive positions as Kog'Maw, because Kog'Maw can't do aggressive things like a Kai'Sa, Samira can. And then if you put yourself into defensive positions, it forces the enemy to come into you, and then if they fail their attack, then they lose. So yeah, hope that helps. If you have any questions, feel free to message me on the Pro Guides website, and good luck on your climb, man. Kog'Maw is broken right now. Just keep abusing it and play the fights a little better.